All right, guys, today we are going to move on to Chapter 8, Section 3, which is multiplying binomials. So we're going to use what is called a FOIL method in order to do this. Basically, FOIL is just an acronym for a way for you to remember the order to multiply in. So we're going to go over what each letter stands for before we actually do a problem. The first letter, F, stands for the first terms in the binomial. Now, if you notice, I'm using red to indicate what the first terms are. Letter O is going to stand for outer terms, and I'll be using the color black to represent that. I stands for inner terms, and that's a purple color. And L will be in green, and it stands for the last terms. So we're going to multiply two binomials together. So here's our first example. Now I know that this is a binomial and another binomial because they each have two terms inside them. Notice that the parentheses are here, and which stands for that we're going to multiply the first terms in each binomial. Then we're going to multiply the outer, inner, and last. Okay, so let's start with the first terms in each binomial. That would be this x and this x. Now I'm going to use this arc here to represent multiplication. So if I multiply this x times this x, I will get x squared. So I'm going to use this red ink that matches this up here, which is standing for the first terms. The second term that we have, we're going to use O and multiply the outer terms. The outer terms are going to stand for this x and this 2. And I'm going to make my arc down here this time. Okay. If I multiply x times 2, I get 2x. Now notice those are both positive, so I'm going to keep an addition sign there when I write down the result of x times 2. The third step is using I, which stands for the inner terms. Now I've used purple up above, so I'm going to use purple here. And these are my two inner terms. 3 times x is 3x. The last terms are going to be indicated in green, and those terms happen to be the last term in each binomial. So it's this 3 and this 2. So 3 times 2 is 6. Now you might be thinking to yourself, oh, this is so crazy, all these different colors here. But again, once you do a couple of them, it'll get much easier. And you don't have to use the colors. Again, the colors are just so that you can kind of trace what I'm doing. So let's go over that one more time. The first terms are in red, and that's this term. It's the first term in the binomial times the first term in this binomial. So x times x is x squared. The second step was to multiply the outer terms. This term and that term are the two outer terms in the binomials. The third step was in purple. Those are the inner terms, and they're right here. The last terms are in green, and it's the last term of each binomial, and they are right there. Now this sort of looks like it makes a little face. I'm going to embellish this a little bit and put some eyes here and maybe some eyelashes. And again, it's just a way for you to remember. So if you see maybe a face forming here, this being the smile and 2 eyes, it's another way for you to know whether or not you're doing these in the correct order and multiplying them to get the correct values. When you're done, you're going to take a look at the values you have here, and you're going to combine any like terms that you have. Well, I have 2 like terms right here. 2x plus 3x is 5x. So once I add those 2 together, I'm going to get x squared plus 5x plus 6. This will be my final answer. And we just multiplied 2 binomials. So let's practice a bit. I'm going to turn my page where you're going to see 3 more problems, and we'll do each one of those together. I'm not going to use all the different colors, but again, I will indicate whether we are multiplying first terms, outer terms, inner, and last. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's our first example. X plus 4 times x subtract 5. Since we do have a subtraction sign here, you do need to pay attention when you're multiplying positive and negative numbers. So let's go ahead and multiply the first terms. Now the first terms are always going to be the first terms of each binomial. So it's going to be this x times this x. That would be x squared. The next that I'm going to do the outer terms. That would be the outer terms of each binomial. So it's this x times a negative 5. And that's going to be minus 5x. For the third value, we're going to multiply the two inner terms. That's 4 times x. And since they're both positive, that's going to be 4x. And the last terms are going to be this 4 times this negative 5, which would be negative 20. Now, if you're doing them in the same order as I am, you're going to always notice that these two in the middle are always like terms, so we can combine those two. So I get x squared, negative 5x plus 4x is a negative x, and then subtract 20 is going to stay there. And there's my final answer. The next one we're going to do in the same manner. Again, the first terms, x times x is x squared. Then we're going to multiply the outer terms. X times positive 8 is positive 8x. Then we're going to do the inner terms, and negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And of course, the last terms, negative 2 times positive 8 is negative 16. Okay, once again, we've got those two middle terms that are alike. I'm going to keep that x squared. I'm going to combine the two like terms. 8x minus 2x is 6x minus 16. Final answer. You know you have a final answer when you don't have any additional like terms. The last example here. Now this is not an example of two binomials like we had in the last two. This is simply a monomial times a trinomial. So you're just going to do your regular old distributive property. We're going to distribute this 2x to everything in parentheses here. So for the first one, I'm going to take this 2x times x squared, and I get a 2x to the third power. Remember, when you multiply variables, you're going to add their exponents. I keep my addition sign. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. 2x times 7 is 14x. Now looking at this one, you do not see any like terms here because remember, for like terms, you've got to have a variable raised to the same powers in order to combine them because we are adding here. So that does not occur. This is the highest power, next highest, and the third highest. So this is in standard form. So I can leave that answer just like it is right there. For the last example, again, I have a monomial times a trinomial, and we're just going to go ahead and do distributive property and then place this in standard form. Negative 3 times 5 is a negative 15. A negative 3 times a negative x squared is a positive 3x squared. A negative 3 times a positive 2 is a negative 6. Now you might notice that this is not in standard form because we have two constants here and we have a 3 times x squared. This term needs to be our leading term because it does have a variable raised to the second power. So all I'm going to do is make sure this term comes first. And then I have two constants. I can actually add those two together. A negative 15 and a negative 6 is a negative 21. Now our answer is in standard form, and that's going to be my final answer. I'm just going to put a little note down here at the bottom of your notes to make sure all your answers are in standard form. And again, to be in standard form, just make sure you have the exponents from the highest to the lowest. And that's going to do it for this video. Your homework is going to be on Math Excel, and there are 7 problems for you to do. If you get stuck, make sure you go back over your notes and check it out. Probably the most challenging part is just making sure that you are using FOIL when you have 2 binomials that you are multiplying.